Hellboy stars David Harbour in the title role after the original Hellboy, Ron Perlman, and the original director of the first two films, Guillermo del Toro, did not return to make a third film. So instead, what we got was a rated R reboot directed by, sorry, I blanked on his name. Oh, Neil Marshall, the director of what many people consider one of the best modern horror films, The Descent, a movie that I still haven't seen, which I probably should, but again, I'm usually a pussy about things, so I don't know, it may take a little bit. But anyway, the film follows Hellboy. You know, it follows a few of his comics, quite a few, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the story focuses mostly on Nimue, the witch from the Arthurian legends. She's come back, you know, she's basically risen from the dead or something like that, and it's up to Hellboy and his companions to stop her. Now, before I get into everything, I normally throw in this disclaimer, so I'll go ahead and do that for those of the uninitiated, you know, those who've never seen any of my videos. The way that I break down my thoughts is that I do a pro and con list. Pro is everything that I liked, and then con is everything that I thought was lacking in quality or just simply bad. And I try to keep these sections separate, but sometimes I'll use one or the other to transition into one another. But mostly I try to keep them separate. Okay, there's that disclaimer. One more disclaimer. I hated this movie. This is by far the worst movie of 2019 in my eyes from what I've seen thus far. And now, there are a couple of highlights. First of all, David Harbour is showing legitimate effort in the role of Hellboy. You can actually see that he's trying, he's really trying his best, but he's being brought down by the issues that I will get into later, and also the makeup that they put on his face. The other one is that Mila Jovovich plays Nimue, and she was a surprisingly enjoyable part because her performance is hammy as hell, but you could sit there and just think, hang on, I think she's actually doing that on purpose. And it really made me feel like she knew that this was going to be bad, so she might as well have fun with it. And now to get into the part that I was waiting for, because I always love talking about the bad things. First of all, the supporting cast are given little to no character, and they don't give performances that are worthy of note. Everyone comes across as though they're just waiting for that bank check to clear. And even Ian McShane, who deserves a much better film and script than this. And every one of these characters, whether they're major supporting characters or those that are kind of largely placed in the background, all of them are utilized either as placeholders or expositional mouthpieces. Especially for the last one, Ian McShane is just an expositional mouthpiece for the most part. And speaking of exposition, there is a lot in this movie, and I mean a lot. You know, whenever there's no action on screen, characters are just standing around talking to each other, you know, explaining their own backstories and explaining other people's backstories, never allowing us to really feel for these characters by seeing who they are and, you know, what they're about, how they operate in everyday life, but rather we are just told everything about everything and everyone. And you guys know that I hate needless exposition. And hey, maybe I am a little too harsh sometimes when it comes to, you know, not really grading, but grading a movie on the use of exposition. But I know that I'm rightfully harsh about a movie and its exposition when my wife, who knew nothing about the source material or the previous movies, and who thought, you know what, I welcome this exposition because I don't know anything about this. I know that I'm rightfully harsh when she leans over to me and says, okay, there's way too much talking down to the audience. Now, okay, those weren't her words, those were mine. But basically, she leaned over and said, why is there so much explaining going on? I was really hoping that I wouldn't have to say this in 2019 after a year where we had, you know, we've had the Jungle Book that won the Academy Award for Visual Effects. You also had Doctor Strange. You had, You had Avengers Infinity War with Thanos. You had First Man, which showed that there is excuse me, that there is a level of realism that can be captured with visual effects to the point where it can actually trick pretty much everybody into thinking that it's actually real. And I was hoping that I wouldn't say it in this time, but I have seen movies made cheaper than this movie with better visual effects, and this is a movie that was made for about $50 million, give or take. It's somewhere in that ballpark, and it almost feels like a TV movie that was just trying to be extra epic. This is some of the worst CGI that I've seen in the past year, and I'm not talking about 2019. I'm talking about April 2018 to now, which is April 2019. And it's so bad that I can think of older animatronics at Disney World that move and look more realistic than anything that I saw in this movie. And there's a certain Star Wars prequel aspect to this movie with like how people interact with some of the CGI characters, and also just the amount of green screen whenever they're not in, you know, small closed off rooms. There's just so much green screen and CGI in this movie. There's way too much. And I will say this, I loved the fact that this movie was given an R rating. There have been a lot of movies in the past couple of years. I don't know why I keep rubbing my face, it just really itches. Sorry. There have been a lot of movies that have come out recently in the past year or two that were supposed to be rated R, but then were given PG-13 ratings. And then you go in and you look at it and you're just like, okay, it's okay, but it could have been so much better with an R rating, because with R ratings you can, you know, you can loosen some things up. You can throw away some of the shackles for the filmmakers. They can take a few more risks with story and the environments. But in Hellboy, all it's used for is a bit of swearing here and there, and then just so much gratuitous blood and gore scenes that don't serve the narrative at all. Come to think of it, I'd be surprised if there were more than 2 deaths in this movie that actually serve the narrative in any way. Just 2 that I noticed. They use this blood and gore for mediocre shock value, and it pretty much runs down to, okay, how can we A, show blood and guts in different ways, B, show different ways to tear a body into pieces, and C, other questions that I can't think of right now, but mostly focus on the first 2 questions? And this one's going to be a mix of 2, so I'll just go ahead and call these 2. But the pacing and editing are a bit of an interesting thing in this movie. They were the things that actually kept me the most interested in this movie. I was fascinated because I had no idea how you can make a fast film with editing that was faster than that of Bohemian Rhapsody at times. You know, how could you make this fast-paced film feel so long? And the movie clocks in at just over 2 hours. I think it was 2 hours and 1 minute. And despite everything speeding through, whether it was full scenes or individual shots just being sped through quickly, and I'm talking about everything's rushed, including the parts where some time could have worked to help out the comedic parts, to actually make them funny. It made me feel like I was at the theater for 2 hours, and it was just after the first hour mark. And finally, the narrative is unfocused. I mean, most of us know that there were issues behind the scenes with this film, and that they primarily focused on the fact that there were way too many people who had way too many different ideas for the film, and the creative differences and battling opinions really show in this film, whether they're things that were changed in the script before shooting, or things that were decided at the last minute on set. And because of this, despite the fact that there's an obvious main plot line, I was unsure what was going on half the time. No, most of the time, I had no idea what the fuck was going on with this movie. And thanks to, you know, each scene feeling disjointed to one another, other than small connections of the overarching story. It just feels as though our characters are just stumbling through life into things that just happen to be connected to the master plot. And because of this, there's this lack of focus overall. I mean, you're in one scene, things happen, and then you move on. And, I for one had a hard time keeping up with what was going on, and also having a hard time actually recalling things said and done in the previous scene, because either it was confusing to start with, or it was just not memorable. In summary, Hellboy is an abysmal failure on every level, pretty much every level, whether it's a story level, a technical level, even an acting level, despite Harbour's trying attempt with this role, and also Mila Jovovich's, hammy but entertaining performance. This is a film that I definitely hope to forget very soon. And those are my feelings on Hellboy 2019. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and my thoughts, please don't hesitate to hit that like button. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date with everything that's going on the channel. And also, don't forget to keep the conversation going down below. Go in the comments section. Just type in your thoughts about the movie, if you haven't seen it, if you're excited to see it, if you still think maybe it'll be good, or maybe why you don't want to see it, things like that. Now, all that's left to say is farewell until the next video, all you moviegoers and casual movie fans, and keep on being awesome.